Welcome to the Aging Better podcast. Here we talk about a holistic approach to aging well, covering health, mindset and lifestyle. We discuss aged care for residents and their families and anyone working in the industry who cares for our elderly. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay connected and never miss an episode.
All right, so we're back aging better and getting better and better at it. And you know what? So many people, there's a huge demographic shift within our society at the moment.
There is.
People are living longer.
Yep.
And, medical things have come so far forward.
It's amazing.
Development. And so there are a number of issues related to that. And, governments and everyone's trying to come up with plans, but we want to try and help people help themselves.
Absolutely. And what can you do to live longer?
Weller, is that an actual word?
Weller?
Or is
Paul
that
Weller.
Paul Weller? Yes.
Style counsel.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go. I was thinking exactly the same person. Maybe that is weird. But so we've talked about falls on many occasions.
We have.
Falls is a game changer. There is a lot of statistical analysis about the impact of falls.
Massive. And it is fall.
And
It's if you're in the northern
yeah,
hemisphere.
yeah, we call it
Hopefully
autumn.
it'll be fall when we post this.
But there are a number of issues related to falls. It's a precursor to many other health challenges.
Yeah.
And we have talked about it before, but I wanted to talk today specifically about the psychology of falls or the psychological effects
Yes.
of falls.
Huge.
What does this mean? Is there a significant impact, and the effect of, on seniors
Yeah.
from this?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to just say one word: vortex. It's a downward spiral. We see this
Yeah.
all the time. One fall will lead to a lot of effects, which we'll talk about in a minute, that just can make that, water spin. And yet there's plenty of things you can do to counter that. It's very much a mind shift, very much an act of the will, and the supportive team around your family, healthcare team, medical team, all that stuff.
The reason that this sort of came up is, I know of someone who had a fall
Yeah.
and wouldn't tell anyone about it.
Yes.
And so there was a number of health impacts
Yeah.
that came from that. So is the starting place acknowledging?
Well, you don't want to tell anyone about it because then they might start making decisions for you outside of your control, doing things that you don't necessarily want to happen. And I think people go to the very end of the fear factor and go, they're going to put me in a nursing home, which we talk about all the time. It's not such a bad thing. And it might be appropriate, but actually most of the time it's not in the early stages. It's not necessary. There's a lot of other things you can do. But if you're not acknowledging it and you're these things are happening, then you're going to be moving into that spiral quicker and it's harder to get out. And it may come to a point where it's almost impossible to get out.
So the fear of falling. I read this phrase, post-fall anxiety syndrome.
Yeah.
Is that
It's
real?
a thing. Yeah, it is definitely a thing. And it can happen at any age in their senior years, when you're sort of 60, 65 plus. That's young these days. But one fall, even though the fall may not have caused an injury, even though, there may be no significant physical effects, it can affect your mental health, it can affect your brain, affect your decision making from there on, and then you will actively make life simpler, which is kind of okay if you don't want to fall tomorrow, but it will lead to weakness, it'll lead to a more sedentary life, you won't be as active, and you will fall more down the track.
And it has a huge impact. I didn't realize, when I'm a kid, I'm climbing up trees and jumping off things and, jumping off the shed and all this. And I jumped off a stage that was maybe 2 feet the other day.
Yeah.
And the impact shocked me, and I'm not by any stretch a senior citizen yet, but I was just like, oh, that actually, and what was funny is I did it in front of an audience and they all went, and I'm like, oh my gosh, do they really think I'm that, I'm that fragile,
And think of the fences and things that we just, leapt over and just, hurdled over as kids and stuff. But time has its ways of changing things.
But one of the negative things of that is that people maybe don't do as much physical activity because of the fall.
Absolutely. So that's the biggest problem. The fear factor will cause a person to do less. Well, they'll shut down. They'll be a lot more careful about the things that they do, and that ultimately is, it's a fairly simple equation. More fear, reduced activity. More fear, reduced activity. More risk.
The vortex.
The vortex.
Hence the vortex. Nice. Okay, so also there's a loss of confidence.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, like anything, I mean, practice makes perfect in anything, doesn't it? So if you are not getting up as much, you're living in a bit of a cotton wool protected environment, then, when it comes to a time to be challenged, to walk off the path, for instance, I do that a lot now, actively, not walk on the path, I'm walking on the grass bit, to just because it's undulating and so a little bit uneven and stuff like that, you're more likely to catch your toe. But if you're doing that on a regular basis, you're more likely to recover from that catch. I was listening to a podcast earlier about that recovery. We all do that. We all might catch a bit of the cement or step down off a step that you didn't notice was there, but you've got this ability to recover quickly. You recover in a split second. But if you're sedentary and if you're not doing these things, you're always on flat surfaces, you're keeping yourself extremely careful. Good in one sense, but in the long-term sense, it's actually very bad. You need to challenge yourself. And if you don't have the confidence and you're starting to lose your balance and those sort of things, again, it's hard to get back from.
And the impact of a loss of independence.
Massive.
Yeah.
Massive in every area of life. We focus from a physio perspective on the physical and, the ability of your muscle to react and move and all those things that we just talk about. Bone density and organ function. We're made to stand up. We're made to walk around. So our vestibular system, our respiratory system, our digestive, all of these systems work better when we're up and about. But if you are sitting more and you're sedentary, everything begins to reduce in their function. But then there's the psychological, which we're talking about today, the psychosocial. You're going to engage less with social interactions with other people. You're not going to be stimulating your brain as much. You're probably going to be dwelling on the negative side of things as well. Oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. Life becomes a bunch of I can'ts.
Yeah. So one of the things that I read about is this can actually be a trigger for depression.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And, it's a combination of factors, isn't it? And it's a loss. People are unable to do a thing that they really wanted to do. I used to be able to do this, but now I can't. I used to be able to do this. And life gets smaller, and it's a form of loss, which, is grief associated with loss. There's anxiety and depression.
And when we're talking about, wellness, and holistic wellness.
Yeah.
A lot of these, mental acuity, physical activity, all of these things all work together. Yes. So if you're impacted in one area, it impacts you in the other areas as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's, and the downward spirals in many, many forms, but there is a way. There's stuff we can do.
Teach me, Miyagi-san. We're going with the Miyagi theme again.
Am I Daniel?
Am I Grasshopper? I don't know. No, I'm Daniel-san.
You're Daniel.
You're Miyagi.
I'm Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm Johnny Lawrence.
Do you mind washing the cars a bit later?
Bit of wax on, wax off action.
Well, getting help. First of all, getting some form of help. So shutting down and not telling people about it and not being, even necessarily honest or trying to hide things, that's not going to be helpful at all, as you first said. So being clear, having a real good think about what the factors were. It might be the first time the person has had a fall. That happened in a very close family member of mine recently. And there were mitigating factors. It was wet. They were outside and they missed a step and they were wearing there were all those things. But they were so down on themselves because of this fall and ended up with a fractured rib or two and, cut face and all the stuff like that. So it was very impacting in a very negative way, but you've got to come back from that. And the good thing was they were open and honest about it. And okay, what do we do about it? So seeing your healthcare professional, seeing your doctor. At that point, there was a nurse there as well that was very helpful and began to share about, different strategies and things to do. There were things at that point which they did that they shouldn't have done. They were able to reflect upon that. So that's the same for anyone. They can have a look back at that thing, especially if there's a health professional involved, a physio, occupational therapist, someone who knows about movement, whether you can say, okay, well, let's put ourselves in that situation again. What could we have done differently? Is it a footwear thing? Is it a visual thing? Something that you weren't able to see because it was raining or because it was this and that. So getting a good assessment by a healthcare professional, nurse is good, RN, physio is even better, I would say, a combination of both in the doctor. And having a look at those falls risk factors and then getting onto a program that impacts those things that can bring you back to a level. So I think about someone in my life. I'm a physio because of Auntie Nola.
Auntie Nola, come on.
And Uncle Bruce, Auntie Nola. She was the one who said, hey, John, why don't you think about physio when I was at school? Okay, Auntie Nola, I'm going to do that. And I got a lot to thank you for, Auntie Nola. And she's a person I think she's very close to her 90s now, late 80s, and she's done yoga her whole life. Yeah. So someone who's doing a regular activity, it can be Tai Chi, it can be some exercise program, and yoga's very, very good. Tai Chi we know is very good for falls. There's a bounce back in that, isn't there? There's something in you that says, I'm going to make sure I get back to yoga, and I'm going to make sure that I'm, improve my balance or work on this. I'm going to talk to the yoga instructor. What can I do? You're beginning to get help, and you're getting that team approach. But the family as well is very powerful. And the family can come around and support and, give all that sort of care stuff that is required. But also, let's get back on the horse. Let's get back, back on your feet and get back challenging your balance so that hopefully we can reduce the impact of this happening again. But there are programs, and we do this ourselves extensively. There's programs in the home and in aged care facilities and in community centres where you can really address those key risk factors that are happening if a fall has happened or if you are predicted to have a fall. So that's what we're looking at these days, is looking at preventative. Before the fall happens, what are the fall's risk factors in your life? Is there some weakness? Is there a side-to-side difference because, you may have had some surgery or something that's knocked you in the past? What's going on in your home environment? What's the physical environment like? All of those things can be very carefully looked at, particularly by a health professional. I'd always recommend physio and OT. A little bias there, but that's my profession. That's why we're here. Yeah. And to be able to go in and really hone on those things before they become a problem. That, to me, is the way of health. It should be, and it's definitely the way of now and of the future, is preventative.
I also think that there's a whole stigma that we need to get rid of, that you're the only one this has ever happened to. This is a very common situation. Yeah. It happens to young and old and everyone in between. And so the impacts might be more severe when you're older. But the reality is that we've all done this. Don't think that you're the only one. Don't think that you can't talk about it. Don't think that you're a failure. I think just getting rid of that stigma is a whole beginning to moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
And getting people to realize, hey, I'm not the only one this has happened to. This is a very common problem, and listen to advice.
Absolutely.
So, hey, there are psychological factors.
There are.
But let's get out in front of it. Let's not see this put us into the vortex. Yeah. Let's see this as a stepping stone that we just press past and continue on with living a well life.
Yeah. It's not the end, and people might think, it's the beginning of the end. Well, no, if you address it, if you get onto it, if you get that help, you can come back. You can come back better than before. That's the amazing thing. You've got to work at it. You've got to have a mental will to go, yep, I'm going to do this. But I've seen people do that at all ages, even into 100 and plus, to say, I'm going to get back on my feet and work hard at this, and they do. You can do it.
Yeah. So, continue watching. If you've had a good experience about this, want you to comment about it. We'd love to hear from you. Anyway, see you later.
Bye. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of the Aging Better podcast. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, follow us, and share it with someone. I'm John Riley. Thank you.